I don't know, I answered honestly, and my voice was hoarse, foreign. It just came out. She looked at me for a long time, then nodded as if deciding something for herself. Such things don't just come out. It's a gift, or a curse. Get out of here now. Thanks for the help, but after this, you can't stay in Windhelm. Those lads will come back with friends, or they'll bring the guards. A servant who knows the voice? That will raise too many questions. Questions you don't have answers for. She shoved a small pouch of coins and a bundle of food into my hand. Here's your pay. Go. Head to Riften or Whiterun. Look for your own kind there, or just get lost, but be out of Eastmarch by dawn. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my attic and looked out the tiny window at the stars of Skyrim, unfamiliar, bright, merciless. I was alone again. But now I knew something very important. I wasn't completely helpless. There was something in me. A spark. That very Thum, the power of the dragon blood. Weak, unskilled, but real. At dawn, with a pack on my shoulders and a makeshift iron dagger, a gift from Haldira for the road, I walked out of the gates of Windhelm. The road led west through the pass. To where? I didn't know. To Riften, as the innkeeper had advised, or to Whiterun, to the court wizard, or to Helgen, to see if history would repeat itself and if Alduin would save anyone on that fateful day. I took a deep breath of the frosty air and took my first step into the unknown. My journey was only just beginning, and now I had a goal. I had to understand who I was, and how to use my knowledge of this world and that strange power sleeping within. Ahead, beyond the mountains, waited the whole province of Skyrim, with its dragons, ancient ruins, plots, and wars. And I, Orion, former programmer, now a prisoner of this world, had to find my place in it. Or die. I walked. It was the only thing left to do. My legs, still unaccustomed to the rough boots I'd traded from a tavern patron for my hopelessly ruined sneakers, were buzzing and aching. On my back, a shabby backpack of coarse leather with my meager possessions. A crust of bread, a hunk of cheese, water in a flask, and that very iron dagger that with every step sent a cold shiver into the small of my back, a constant reminder of its uselessness against any real threat. The road from Windhelm snaked like a gray ribbon between harsh cliffs and sparse gnarled pine trees. The wind, meeting no obstacles, swept through the pass, sucking the last drops of warmth from my body. I huddled in a worn-out cloak, a gift from that same Haldira, and tried not to think about what lurked in those woods. Bears, saber cats, and worse. Knowing the game map was both a blessing and a curse. I remembered the approximate locations of the fast travel points. Journeyman's Nook, campsite of the wolf. But here there was no comfortable tab key and no convenient compass marker. There was only bare, hostile reality. Every creak of a branch, every rustle in the bushes made me freeze, my heart pounding wildly, my hand instinctively reaching for the dagger's hilt. By noon I reached a fork. One road, more worn, led southwest towards Riften. The other, narrower and forgotten, wound into the mountains, towards the far reaches of Eastmarch, and if one walked long enough, to Whiterun. I stopped, unsure which way to turn. Riften, a thieves' den full of dangers but also opportunities to disappear. Whiterun, a bastion of relative civilization, but also the place the Dragonborn was destined to come to sooner or later. As I stood there hesitant, my ear caught a strange sound. Not the wind, not an animal. A metallic clang, muffled shouts, and an alarming howl that made my blood run cold. A wolf's howl, but an octave lower and with a soul-chilling, almost metallic ring to it. Frost trolls. It was immediately clear to me, and even in the game they were nasty opponents at low levels. Instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to go around. But curiosity, that fatal gaming habit of charging headfirst into trouble, proved stronger. I crept toward the sound as stealthily as I could, crawling and using boulders and tree trunks for cover. The scene that unfolded before me in a small wooded valley made me forget to breathe. This was nothing like a slick animation. This was chaos, dirt, and blood. A group of Imperial Legionnaires, 3 or 4 of them, were desperately fighting off a pack of frost trolls. The monsters were enormous, their blue frozen hides glinting in the sun, their icy tentacles whipping against shields and armor, leaving frost and deep cracks in the metal. One legionnaire was already on the ground, his body covered in a layer of frost, his face frozen in a final scream. I froze, pressed against the cold stone. My heart was ready to jump out of my chest. I saw one of the legionnaires, an officer in a crested helmet, fighting desperately with a short sword covering his wounded comrade. "Hold the line," he rasped, "to the lake, to the water." But there was nowhere to retreat. The frost trolls, hissing and swaying their tentacles, surrounded them. I saw the fear on the soldiers' faces, real animal fear of death. These weren't soulless NPCs, these were living people who wanted to live. And suddenly the officer's gaze darted in my direction. He noticed me, hiding behind the rock. There was no hope for rescue in his eyes, only desperation and a final defiant resolve. "Run, traveler," he shouted, barely dodging a blow from an icy tentacle. "Warn everyone." A pack of frost trolls on the old road. "Run." His cry distracted one of the monsters. It slowly, with a vile crunching sound, turned its torso and fixed its empty, icy eyes on me. And it began to crawl in my direction. The paralysis of fear was replaced by pure, uncontrollable terror. I stumbled backward, tripped over a root, and fell heavily to the ground. The smell of moss, damp earth, and my own sweat hit me. The troll advanced, its tentacles rising for a strike. I could see deadly icicles forming on them. And again, from the depths, from deep inside, from the place where terror and the fury of helplessness churned, something erupted. Not a conscious desire to use a power. Just an instinctive animal impulse. "Get back!" I didn't shout. I exhaled. A strained, ragged exhale at the very limit of my ability. Foos. This time the effect was stronger. The air in front of me shimmered with a visible wave. Dust and dry leaves shot upward. The troll, already winding up for a strike, recoiled. It wasn't thrown back, but it stumbled, lost its balance. The icy mask of its face twisted for a moment into something resembling surprise. My pitiful, clumsy shout was like a slap in the face, not fatal but stunning and humiliating for such a creature. That moment of confusion was enough. The Legion officer, seizing the pause, lunged forward and with a furious cry drove his sword into the base of the monster's tentacle. The ice cracked with the sound of shattering glass. The troll let out a piercing, grating screech and crawled away. To me, the officer shouted again, this time to me. Run here now. I don't remember how I scrambled to my feet and ran. My legs were buckling, my vision blurred. I reached their small defensive circle, and the legionnaires immediately closed ranks, shielding me with their shields. The fight lasted another few minutes that felt like an eternity. In the end, at the cost of another wound, the legionnaires finished off the troll I had stunned and drove the others away. The air smelled of blood, ozone, and a strange icy stench coming from the monsters' bodies. Silence fell, broken only by the heavy breathing of the survivors. The officer, having removed his helmet, wiped blood and grime from his forehead. His face was tired and stern. "What was that, lad?" he asked, looking at me. His gaze was heavy, scrutinizing. "The voice? Are you a graybeard initiate?" I don't know. I was forced to answer again, my throat raw and burning. "It just happens." "Just happens," he repeated with disbelief. Then he sighed and waved his hand. "All right, you saved our hides, damn it, thank you. Without your little push, it would have been tight. I'm Legate Avantius, we're from Fortamol, and you are?" I gave my name as Orion, a wanderer. Avantius nodded, not pressing for details. "Where are you headed?" "I don't know," I admitted honestly again. "From Windhelm, looking for a place." The legate looked at me carefully, at my poor clothes, at my hands still shaking from adrenaline. "With abilities like that, even if they just happen, the wolves will have you for dinner soon on the road. You're coming with us. Fortamol isn't far. You'll rest. We'll get those wounds bandaged. We'll figure it out from there. The Empire needs strong people, especially now." It wasn't an offer. It was an order softened by gratitude, and I had no choice. Go with them under the protection of the Legion, or stay alone in this world that had nearly killed me twice in one day. I nodded silently. The walk to Fortamol took several hours. We walked in silence, utterly exhausted. The legionnaires carried the body of their fallen comrade. I walked in the center of their group, feeling like an outsider and useless but protected. Fortamol turned out to be a small, grim fortress on the shore of a lake. The guards on the walls watched us with heavy looks. Inside, it smelled of smoke, boiled grain, and discipline. I was given a corner in the barracks, a bowl of hot stew and clean rags to bandage the scrapes on my hands from the fall. Lying on a hard bunk, I listened to the soldiers snore and stared at the ceiling. Today I had used my power consciously for the first time, or rather it had used itself through me. I had saved lives, and I was offered shelter. But I had also seen death up close, real terrible death, and I realized my knowledge was a pathetic abstraction compared to the sticky metallic smell of blood and the soul-freezing screech of a monster. Legate Avantius said the Empire needed strong people, but who was I? A random traveler with a strange power. I wasn't a hero. I was a frightened man in a cruel foreign world. But there was no way back, only forward. Tomorrow I would have to decide to accept the legate's offer and stand under the banners of the Empire, or go my own way, risking capture by bandits, dragons, or my own weakness. Doubt swirled in my head, but exhaustion took over. I fell into a heavy, restless sleep full of icy tentacles and the echo of my own hoarse whisper. Foos, I spent several days in Fortamol, a blur of tense waiting. Time flowed differently here than in my old world, measured not by deadlines and phone notifications, but by the changing of the guard, the ring of a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil, and the solid thud of axes chopping wood for winter. My body, exhausted by stress and malnutrition, was slowly healing. The hearty, simple food of the mess hall, thick barley stew, black bread, smoked meat, was doing its job. But my mind was feverishly working, finding no peace. I caught myself studying the scars on the Legionnaire's arms, listening to their conversations not for the general meaning but for the intonations, for the topics they discussed in whispers away from the ears of their superiors. Legate Avantius didn't pressure me openly, but his heavy, appraising gaze constantly followed me. He saw in me not a person but a curious weapon, a potential resource to be tamed, understood, and directed. His interest was cold and practical. One day he brought 2 veterans to me, Decurion Marcus and his partner, a burly Nord named Rorik. Both looked at me with undisguised curiosity and a degree of distrust. "They say you can whisper in a way that makes even frost trolls stumble," Rorik said hoarsely, crossing his arms over his powerful chest. "Show us." We went out to the drill ground, a trampled patch of earth near the fortress wall. The sun was already dipping toward the mountain peaks, casting long, stretching shadows. It was cold. I felt like a complete idiot. "I can't control it," I tried to argue, but Marcus just smirked. "No one could at first. A sword doesn't dance in your hand by itself either. Try. Focus. Imagine you're not just shouting, but pushing the air out with your whole chest, with all your willpower." I tried. I stood in the middle of the yard, clenching my fists and trying to push that power out of me. All I managed was a tense, stupid face and a stifled grunt. Rorik snorted. Marcus watched with growing disappointment. "All right, enough clowning around," the Decurion said finally. "Let's try something tangible. Here, take this." He shoved a wooden training sword into my hands. It was heavy and awkward, and my palms were immediately sore. The training was hell. Rorik, moving with surprising ease for his size, mercilessly beat me with his wooden blade on my arms, thighs, and torso. I parried as best I could, but my movements were clumsy, delayed. "Your head's not just for show," he growled. "Anticipate. Watch the shoulders. Where the shoulder goes, the strike will follow." The shield felt like an unbearable weight. I hid behind it, and every blow from Rorik resonated with a deafening crash in my arm, as if it were being struck by a blacksmith's hammer. Within half an hour I was collapsing, covered in bruises, my clothes soaked with sweat despite the cold. But something began to become clear. I started to catch the rhythm, to understand that before an attack Rorik would slightly shift his weight, to feel the moment when to block with the shield and when to jump back. These were tiny, pathetic successes, but they were mine. Not a power granted from above, but a skill earned through pain and sweat. The instructors were strict but fair. They weren't bullying me, they were teaching me what was essential to survive even a single day in this world. How to pitch a tent so you wouldn't freeze at night. How to start a fire in the rain. How to tell by tracks who had passed on the road and when. How to clean and oil a weapon so it wouldn't fail you in battle. Imperial discipline, which I had always considered something stifling in the game, here in reality turned out to be a structure, a framework that kept me from falling apart from fear and uncertainty. There was order here. Clear rules. I knew when to eat, when to sleep, when to stand watch. It was a gulp of stability in an utterly insane world, but the more I immersed myself in this life, the more acutely I felt that this was not my path. I saw how the legionnaires despised the rebel stormcloaks, heard them discuss the cursed elves from the Thalmor. Their world was black and white, the Empire, order, everything else, chaos. Their righteousness was ironclad and unquestionable, and I had other knowledge in my head. I knew Ulfric had his own valid reasons, that not all dark elves were bad, that the real threat was far more terrible and ancient than any civil war. And also, I was irresistibly drawn to something else, the shadows, the mystery, what had always given me thrills in the game, the Dark Brotherhood, a legend, a myth, assassins serving the Night Mother herself. Their existence here in this reality was both terrifying and incredibly tempting. To imagine that I could find them, become part of that ancient dark family, it seemed a far more fitting fate for a lost soul like me than being a cog in the Imperial machine, and of course the Dovahkiin, the Dragonborn, the one destined to decide the fate of all Skyrim. Did he exist already? Was he walking the road to Helgen right now? I caught myself scrutinizing the face of every new recruit, every traveler who entered the fort, searching their eyes for a spark of something extraordinary. I had to find him, not only because he was the key to defeating Alduin, but because he was a connection. The only other person who might also feel this unreality of it all, this immense weight of a preordained destiny. On the third day, Legate Avantius summoned me to his office, a small room with maps on the walls and a simple wooden desk. "Well, Orion," he asked, setting aside his quill, "gotten used to army life? Make your decision. There's a place for you in the Legion. With such abilities, you could go far. The Empire is generous to those who serve faithfully." I stood before him, looking at the intricate lines on the map of Skyrim. I saw the tiny mark for Fort Amol. I saw Windhelm. I saw Riften. And somewhere out there, in the wilderness between these points, there had to be the Brotherhood's secret sanctuary. I took a deep breath. These people had saved my life, fed me, trained me, given me shelter. And I was about to leave them. "Legate," I began, and my voice sounded steadier than I expected. "I am grateful to you for everything, but my path does not lie here. My skills, they are not for ranks and discipline. They are wild, and I need to find answers, who I am, why I can do this." Avantius looked at me for a long time. His face showed neither anger nor disappointment, only a faint, weary sadness, like a man who had seen many choose the wrong path. "Answers," he repeated. "Everyone is looking for them. Often they find only death. But I cannot hold you by force. The Empire has no need for those whose hearts are not with it." He reached into a desk drawer and pulled out a small but sturdy steel sword in its scabbard and a tightly stuffed coin purse. "This is for you. Not for service. For saving the lives of my men by the lake. A sword is not a toy. Remember what you were taught. And the coins, The world of Skyrim is harsh. Gold solves many problems. The next morning I left Fortimol. I was no longer wearing rags, but simple, sturdy Legionnaire recruit leather armor. On my back was the sword, on my belt the purse and a water flask. I was not a warrior. But I was no longer that helpless worm vomited onto the Skyrim shore by the sea. The guard silently opened the gates for me. I stepped onto the road leading south towards Riften. The air was cold and clean. Somewhere ahead, mysteries awaited me. The ancient brotherhood, the legendary dragonborn, and my own destiny, which was only beginning its turn. I looked back one last time at the gray walls of the fort, turned to face the rising sun, and took my first independent step into the unknown. The hunt had begun.